Hey loves, so yes, I posted yesterday. I'm going to be posting more regularly, longer videos, more on the Booktok, book related. I will have Marvel, Disney content still will do Easter eggs and all that jazz, but just to let you guys know that for a little bit, as you saw from my last video, we're going to talk more books. Anyway, we are doing a get to know the Booktalker / booktuber Q&A. Feel free to ask any questions. I will happily answer down in the comments, but I was trying to use the filter the other day to, if you're on TikTok, there's a Booktok Q&A filter, but for some reason recording in TikTok has been like really annoying, so recording outside of it, but I instead ended up writing a whole bunch down and doing a live, but I didn't get half I only like answered a couple of questions, so I decided that I'm gonna do this whole video based off those questions, and we're gonna have some chats, okay? So feel free to voice your own opinion, your own story, your favorite books, your favorite genres, all that, because we love to hear more. Hi. I love to hear more from you guys. I wish I could collab more. Anyway, so what got me started in reading was when I was about 4 years old in preschool. This is what my parents told me, that I really, really wanted to learn how to read. And I begged my preschool teacher, and for some reason, my teacher didn't know how to read. So finally, my parents taught me, and from then on, I completely have been obsessed with books, okay? I mean, obsessed with books. I never not had a book in my hand. So I read every single book in my elementary school. I was going to the library multiple times. My parents were also big readers, so if you're wondering, not as big as me. They're not as open to genres and tropes as I am, but they are definitely readers. They definitely don't read as many books as I do. But, I mean, we have 4 full bookcases. Well, some are like yay high. Like, there's 2 that are yay high, and then there's 2 that are bigger, and then we kind of just have books all over the place. Like, it's true. Maybe one day I'll do a tour of our bookshelves. So my dad prefers to read fiction, historical fiction, preferably, a little bit of paranormal, like, we have, like, a lot of Anne Rice books. He was into that. He really likes, more recently, the Sherlock Holmes series by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I think, in part, it was the storyline. Like, I love Sherlock Holmes, but he is still friends with Kareem. They went to high school together, so supporting him. And actually, I grabbed one of Kareem's books from the library, and I was hoping that my dad would be encouraged to read a little bit more. He's been reading more newspapers lately than actual books, and he like never uses his Kindle, so I may end up asking if I could use it instead. This man, I love my dad, but like, he is not very technology forward. My mom, on the other hand, is. So the books that my mom reads are more foodie based. So her favorite author is Ruth Reichel in that manner. She likes LGBTQ books, so Alex Gino. I did just recommend Johnny Appleseed, which I'm currently reading, by Joshua, I think it's Joshua Whitehead. I'll do a review when I'm finished. And she really likes kind of like historical fiction, but she likes a lot of historical based books, more like true stories. So Thane Rosenbaum is one of her favorites, and she also likes Howard Zinn. She's both my parents are big history buffs. They both ended up majoring in history in college, and I think that's also where I got my love of history. Like I love history. I think there's just so many different parts to history that you can dive into and always learn more, and um but yeah, so but my mom also reads some YA as well with me. And, I remember growing up that it was second grade when Harry Potter came out, the first one. So Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And I remember my teacher, so I had the same teacher for first and second grade, FYI. But I remember like circle time, we would read on the rug, and we read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I fell in love with the books, and I know J.K. Rowling is problematic, and I 100% agree, and we can have those discussions. I'm just telling my story, okay? So I grew up reading them, right? This was before we knew all about her being problematic. And for a lot of people, it's a fandom that got people into loving to read. Now, I was always already a big reader, right? But there's other books that I remember reading as a kid, and I ended up saving them for my son. So The Cricket in Times Square. I have the original Chronicles of Narnia. My mom gifted that to me. So I still have those. And then, I was really big into YA, paranormal. So I did get rid of my Twilight. I do have some book mail coming the next 2 weeks. And I'll talk more about those books, but those are some of my favorite YAs, for a reason. They're paranormal YAs. So L.J. Smith with her Night World series. Wasn't a big fan of the Vampire Diaries or the Secret Circle. In terms of books, I wasn't a fan of the Secret Circle in terms of show, but I did like the Vampire Diaries. So sometimes, film to book adaptation, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, But I will say Vampire Diaries, the show, was much better than the books. But I do like L.J. Smith as a YA author. Kelly Armstrong, she's one of my favorites. Cornelia Funk with her Inkheart, oh god, what is it? Inkheart, Ink something, Ink Death series. Inkspell, sorry. It was Inkheart, Inkspell, Ink Death series. And they butchered the film with Inkheart, which makes me really sad because I'm also a big Brendan Fraser fan. But this was, I can honestly say, his worst film ever. They did not do it justice. I also read Aragon. I reread Aragon last week before, something like that. I have the thing on my TikTok. And you'll see some more longer reviews on here coming up. So there's a whole bunch of things that, I grew up reading, and I'm continuing to read, but I'm spreading out a little bit more. So I'm reading more diversely, way more BIPOC authors, different genres, different subgenres. Whew, sorry, needed breath. We're being a little silly today. I've really gotten into dark romance lately. Believe it or not, I've never read a Stephen King book. I'm still tempted, and I'm still trying to figure out which book I want to read first. I'm tempted to read The Shining first, but also, was it The Salem's Lot? Which I feel like is not talked about. And then I did hear Fairy Tale was really good, so I'm iffy about it. I've also never watched a Stephen King movie. Okay, I know that sounds really strange, especially being that when I was growing up, So, again, my parents knew a lot of people, including Stephen King. My parents shared a box seats with him at the Mets games. So I've known him since I was little. And then back in 2019, when I was on vacation, it was November 2019, so it was during Thanksgiving. We have this tradition. We haven't done it since COVID during that time, but we had this tradition of going to Maine for Thanksgiving, and the hotel that we stay at used to do breakfast in this little art gallery. It's one of my favorite, it's one of our favorite little areas. You can see the beautiful art. I'm getting distracted though. So how we get to Stephen King is my son and I were sitting there having breakfast, and he walks by. So I didn't get to say hi or anything, but yeah, just funny times. And I do want to go up to Derry, Maine, and there's a whole museum. The whole town is like based off him. That's like where he lives. So I think that would be interesting. And I also want to go to the hotel that The Shining was based off of. Not because The Shining was done there, but because it is the most haunted hotel, and I've been obsessed with that place since I was like 12. I'm really into paranormal, historical places. So like this year, if I get a chance to go back to Maine, my plan was to do a day trip into Salem, Massachusetts. I've been to Salem. I was like 15. Let's say I was 15. 16? I was looking at colleges then, but we did do 3 days in Salem, and I desperately want to go back. It was such a fun trip, and it's educational. There's so much to do. There's so many books based off Salem. Really big history buff, like I said, paranormal buff. Do the ghost tours, highly recommend. I love doing ghost tours, by the way. But yeah, so I'm sorry, I just went on a rant. If I go, I promise you, I will film there. I'm trying not to go in October because it gets too crowded. And I don't think we're going to be going this month, being September, which is when I've been going the last few years. We'll probably end up going in November, but we'll see. All right, so, oh my goodness. Let's talk about, do I reread books? I do. Now, there's very few books that I will reread. Okay, I rewatch movies, rewatch shows far more than I reread books. Okay, and I feel like, I know it sounds strange, but my books are my love, besides my kid and my animals. My books, I feel like there's so many thousands, millions of books that are out there that I can't get enough of, so I try not to reread very often. But if I get into a reading slump, or especially a reading slump, but sometimes I become a mood reader and like I feel like I haven't been reading as often, I'll tend to reread a book. Alright, now what do I reread? I used to reread Harry Potter every year. I stopped doing that the last 4 or 5 years, 4 years at least, with, the whole J.K. Rowling being problematic. You can't separate the art from the artist. Okay, so like, we're taking a pause. Like I said, I reread Aragon by Christopher Poloni. Oh. I thought you went back inside. I'm filming. Sorry about that. My son just came out and, yeah, scared the living daylights out of me right here. Kids. Like, this is what happens when you're a mom and you read. I constantly get distracted. Alright, so that being said, I reread Aragon by Christopher Poloni. I do plan on finishing the rest of the series. He did come out with a new-ish book. I don't remember when it was, but it's called Murtock by Christopher Poloni. And I want to read that, right? But I want to remember who that character was, which was in the Inheritance series, so that's partly why. I may or may not end up rereading The Hunger Games because the Songs of the Ballad, if it's related, I know I have the book, but I haven't, like, taken a big look at it, then I'll reread that to, like, catch up. The other books that I will reread are, just give me a second. Okay, I had to run inside to grab one of the books because I'm not filming inside right now. I'm trying to use the good weather for filming while I can. It's like super hot out today, but my house gets loud, so filming sometimes gets tough. Anywho, so my favorite series, it's historical fiction, badass, female protagonist. I do recommend you read the first 3 books to understand, and then it's basically standalone and you can understand what happens. There are 66 books. I know that sounds crazy. I love them all. The last 3 are only on audio, so I highly suggest you listen to it on audio. For the graphic audio, it's like a movie in your mind, which is exactly how I feel. Okay, like that's what they say. It's true. Anyway, I can't speak. Anyway, it's Rogue Angel by Alex Archer. That's a pseudonym. But this is actually book. I just grabbed a book. I don't even know what book this is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. This is book 20. See? Anyway, these are pretty quick reads. I actually got my dad into these a while ago. He hasn't read them all because I actually have most of them on audio. And he's not a big audiobook fan. But love this series, so we definitely read. I definitely, if I'm in a reading slump or I'm in a mood, I will put on one of these. So for this, I feel like it's the female version, magical female version, I should say. She has a magical sword, but that's it. That's why you need to read the first 3 books to understand how that came to be. Alright, anyway, she is the female version of Josh Gates, but more badass. Now, I love Josh Gates. If you watch Destination Truth, Expedition Unknown, Expedition X, Legendary Locations, and anything else he's in, I love his book. I honestly love his personality and his shows, and I definitely want to get his books. They're on my TBR. But yeah, I'm very much into that. Like, I will read books on that, but I also like to watch the shows. Okay. And I love that he has books, but they're, like, hard to come by, which sucks. Alright. Speaking of which, do I change my books based on the season? I can't speak. I can't speak sometimes. So, I wish I was that type of person. I wish I was that type of person that truly stuck to my TBR for the month. I will admit I am very bad about that. I've been making this year on TikTok, for the most part, my monthly TBR. And then I get so far in, and then I end up mood reading. It's been happening. It's been happening. So what I've tried to do for this month, being September, is that I will post a video on that, what is in my TBR, is I'm trying to make room that I have to mood read, right? So I have a certain amount of books that I definitely want to get through, and then I have room to mood read, right? Because my TBR is honestly ridiculously long. Like, I'm still organizing it, and it's like 3,000 books in. Okay, like, it's beyond ridiculous. But with the 23 for 23 challenge, if you guys remember what that is, it's aiming to read 23 more books by the end of 23 that are by BIPOC authors. I'm trying to push up those books in my list so I can do that. Now, you know, the goal is to do this all year long. So you'll see a lot of shorter videos, especially on my TikTok, like just pushing out content that you might enjoy that I can't read that fast. Like, I can read a book a day, and that's a lot for a lot of people, right? It depends on the book. Sorry guys, I am all over the place, right? Speaking of which, do I track my reading? I try to. I will admit I've gone off track in terms of tracking all of my reading, and like I haven't been doing my reviews as much, even on TikTok. I'm trying to get into that, so you'll see more and more of that over there, and I'm trying to bring it now back over here. So there's longer reviews, less reviews there, but like, hey, I just read this. This is the stars, long review here. But I know that my Goodreads number is not accurate. I'm under. So I'm over 100 there, right? Or I'm around 100 books according to Goodreads, but I've definitely read more because it doesn't pick up for audiobooks and it doesn't pick up for library books. So I have to physically do that, and sometimes I forget to. It happens, right? Or even like, physical books, right? So sometimes it does pick up on audiobooks. It doesn't pick up on all audiobooks, so it depends on the app. If you're in Audible, it will pick it up. I should have said that. You can also listen to audiobooks on YouTube. There are some YouTubers that are authors that post their own books, and I love that. I haven't been counting children's books. These are only books for me. I do count cookbooks because I read a lot of cookbooks, and I have a vast cookbook collection. I want to show it one day. I definitely want to post that. All right. Let's see. Speaking of which, because I read a lot, do I remember the books I read? Yeah, most of them. Well, some of them. It depends on the book, and it depends on, how I felt. So I can generally remember how I felt about the book. I may not remember all of the small details. So like bigger name books, like obviously Aragon or these books, I will be honest, like I don't remember. If you ask me what happens in this particular book, unless I look at the back, I won't remember, what it's about, right? Just because there's so many of them. But do I remember, like, if I read the back, like, it says Bigfoot's existence, now I remember what happened in the book, right? I honestly enjoy this one. This is, I like the indigenous books, the ones where they're on indigenous land most. Anywho, but some books I like don't remember everything, if that makes sense. Now, if we're talking like, so like I remember a lot of Haunting Adeline 2, Satan's Affair, which I finished the other day. I remember Almost There, I just read it. Do I remember Harry Potter? Yes. Not every detail. I mean, it's hard to remember everything, but knowing how you feel. Now, if you see a character name or you see a title, like, or the cover, an author that you may remember some things, right? So some things may trigger that that memory. But generally I can remember enough to write my review and then move on and enjoy more books, right? I don't think my brain needs to be filled with thousands of books, right? So, sorry guys, I'm like, okay. So, did I read as a child and a teen? I kind of already covered that, but I also encourage children and teenagers to read. I think it's very important. And all forms of reading is reading, right? So ebooks, audiobooks, comic books, newspapers, magazines, it counts. Do we want to see them read more physical books or, just books in general? Yes. But I think we also have to be aware that not every genre is for every child. Not everyone's going to have the same opinions about the book. So, I remember being in school and I remember some of the reading lists, especially in high school. Like, we read Wuthering Heights. I was the only one in my class that liked that book. Okay? But then we read Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, The Picture of Dorian Gray. I hated those two books. I hated them, right? And I'm a big reader. That doesn't mean I like every book that we read. So, just working with your child is important, right? And if your kid is older and prefers picture books, that's okay. Like, I don't see anything wrong with that. If your kid prefers comic books, you know what? There's stuff in there too. There's education. Let them enjoy it. So, speaking of which, do I read any other forms of written media? Yes. I do like my comic books, as you guys can tell, especially Marvel. I will read the news, but not as often. I prefer to watch the news, and then even then, it's very rare. Magazines, not particularly. Like National Geographic, yes, but it's not very often. I have like a huge collection of Nat Geo magazines. I have a huge collection of different magazines from my mom as well, but I feel like it's one of those things that you have to be in the mood for. I will say they're good bathroom reads. Okay, so alright, let's see. Do I pay attention to tropes? Yes and no. So, for the most part, I would say yes, depending on the genre, right? So, romance, I'm more of the no. I'll read almost anything. Contemporary romance is one of the things that I, prefer not to read, but I will read it. But I prefer not to read it. It, really has to catch my eye. For everything else, yes, very much so, or subgenre, I do pay attention, especially with nonfiction. So, answering another question, do I write? Yes, I write nonfiction. I have 5 books out. Thank you, cows. They're rooting me on. So I have 3 books on homeschooling, and then I have 2 books so far in the series, the Disney Pixar connection, which is how we got started here. And the 3rd book will be out of my series after the SAG-AFTRA strike is over. I promise you it'll be the Pixar shorts. Also, my computer is still down, and I'm hoping that I need my computer back because it's driving me crazy. But yes, I write. So with my reading nonfiction, I prefer history. I prefer politics, and even then, it's very particular. And even in history, it's very particular about what I read, right? Film, I love to read about films, biographies, autobiographies specifically. It really just depends on what I'm looking for, if that makes sense. Horror, I'm not the biggest horror fan. That's not to say I don't read horror, it's just I don't generally read horror. So, one of my favorite authors in horror is Heather Graham. I like hers. Hers are a little bit more paranormal horror, so they're not too spooky. And, I can handle spook, but it's just, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I like fairy tale retellings and fantasy. I like a good YA. I have been trying to avoid more of the popular YA books, only because I feel like I don't want to be disappointed the way that I was with Harry Potter and the author, and separating the art from the artist. So I'm being very careful about who I pick up. So, and that goes for any genre, I should say. So, yes, we can talk about, like I said, J.K. Rowling, but some other ones, and this might be controversial, so don't come at me. But I refuse to read Sarah J. Maas, Colleen Hoover, and then there's some, like, other smaller authors, especially indie authors, who I've seen be problematic. So I have a problematic author list. I refuse to support those people. Now, that's not to say that they can't go sell their books, that people don't like them, that they feel like they can separate the art from the artist. That's their opinion. But I refuse to put my money where my mouth is. You know what I'm saying? So, I'm just not going to support those people. Alright. Speaking of which, do I rate books? Yes, obviously I do. I do reviews. But is it easier to rate a book you love versus a book you hate? I would say it really depends. Sometimes I feel like I don't have the words to express how I truly feel. And I don't necessarily want to wash my review down. I try not to hate a book. I try not to give low reviews. So if I DNF a book, I'm just not going to rate it. Like, that's just not fair, right? I rarely give 3 stars or lower, I will be honest. But just because a book isn't for me doesn't mean it's not for other people, right? So I want to make that clear. So if I hate an author or problematic authors, right, I'm not going to go rate their books. I didn't read them, I'm not going to go rate them, right? Now, that being said, did I love Harry Potter? Yeah, but I'm not going to go rate them knowing she's a problematic author when it also boosts her, too. See what I'm saying? Like, in terms of hating, so there was a book recently that I felt meh about. I wouldn't say I hated it, but I didn't, like, love it either. Actually, I can give you 2 examples. So the first one is Mafia Men by Cardine Gray. It's a series, and I just felt like I just struggled to get through the first half, and then it got good, and then it was like, I don't really want to go read the next book. Like, it's a series, right? A book that I do love, or I gave it a little bit higher, but still felt like that meh in the first half, was Satan's Affair by H.D. Carlton. Now, I already knew about Sibby, the main character, from Haunting Adeline. But that first half was just like, I know why she did it, it's important, but it just kind of like, I felt like there may have needed to be an order in terms of how you read the books, you know, to understand. And that would have been easier, but I still love the character and love the books, right? I love H.D. Carlton as an author. All right, and then a series that's very popular, or has been very popular in the last 2 years, is Zodiac Academy. It is spicy, paranormal. There's like 9 books, I think now. 8.5, 9, I don't even know. I read the first one. I think it was actually at the beginning of this year. Like, this year has been going like crazy. And it was okay, but I really just don't have an interest in necessarily going to read the next books, unless I'm absolutely bored. That's not to say it's not a good series. I couldn't get into it. It kind of felt like, I don't know how to describe it. It felt like a spicier version of Vampire Academy, by Rachel Mead, who I love that series. but more paranormal based, and like it's hard to describe, right? People love it. It just wasn't the book for me, and I generally read those types of books. So yeah, just something that I feel weird about. All right, book clubs. Are any of you part of book clubs? I am not. Now, I don't hate on book clubs. This might be a controversial opinion, but I find that some book clubs can be problematic for various reasons. Now, for me, I love talking about books, obviously. We talk about books on TikTok. We're talking about books here. I talk about books, when I go to the library, or when I'm in bookstores, or when I'm just meeting people. But to read the same book at the same time as someone, especially when you live in a small town, there's only so many copies, is rough. But to read a certain book, so it depends on how the book club is run. Some meet like once a month and they read the whole book by then. Okay, so you can go at your own pace. Some are more like, okay, read to this chapter by this date. I just feel like, especially as a mood reader, I can't necessarily do that. So I'm not against it, but also I find that a lot of the book clubs are not diverse in their reading, not just in lack of genre, which I can understand that, but also in the authors, right? And then, are they truly giving criticism to those authors or those characters, those books? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just one of those things. I would love to be part of a book club, ideally, but it's just not for me. It's just not for me. Alright, speaking of which, have I read the, what percentage of books you own that you read? That's a laughable question. You see what I'm saying? I would say probably 25% if I'm being generous. And that's in physical books. In ebooks and audiobooks, it's probably far less because I own a lot of books. Now, back to controversial opinion, okay? Alright. I'm sure you've seen booktubers, booktalkers, bookstagrammers have their aesthetic bookshelves behind them and stuff, and they look beautiful. No hate to that. No hate at all. I love the look. However, it is not ideal for all of us to do. So, like, you see me filming here most of the time because this is ideally a quiet space. I have room to, like, move. Or I film in my bathroom sometimes. Sometimes you'll see me in my room or in the living room, but it really has to be like a quiet day, like nobody home. Otherwise, there's just so many people in my house, okay? And you can hear everything. But yeah, so I don't think that having those aesthetic book shelves is meant for everyone, because those books can get very pricey, right? And I admit that I buy books that are cheap, used. I don't care. Most of my reading is honestly done through audio or ebook. And if you don't even do that and you use the library, there's nothing wrong with that, right? So I don't want anyone to feel bad if they don't have that. Those looks are beautiful, but it's just not ideal for everyone, right? It's not, and that's okay. But also with that, I love the special editions, but it also, maybe it's my OCD in me that it would drive me crazy not seeing the binding of the book to know the name. Like, my son sometimes puts books back the opposite, where you see the paper side, and it drives me flippin' insane. Now, I know he's not doing that on purpose, he's just putting the book away, but like, Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we are almost done with my list of okay, let's see. What books influenced your life? So besides HP growing up, I will say that the series that mostly influenced my life was Rogue Angel. There was another book, The Making of a Woman Vet by Sally Haddock. That is in my D-Haul video, which I still have to post. That was part of it. There's been some other books. I'm trying to think. But yeah, I mean, mainly, I would say if I had to pick one series, it would be my Rogue Angel series. Like, I'm obsessed. Okay. So I kind of talked about my reading pace. Generally, I could read a book in a day. It just depends on the book. If I'm really into it, I will read it within a few hours. Even on audio, like, I will speed things up. I can listen to things fast-paced, like between 2 and 3. If it's going too slow, I zone out. I will be honest with you. But I have to be in the mood to read also. So even though I'm reading fast and understanding, that's the other part, right? It's not just reading fast, it's understanding what you're reading. It's also like, that doesn't mean I'm reading every day, right? We have things to do too. Alright, so we kind of talked a little bit about film, TV show, adaptations. I think that there are some that did better than others. Obviously, we talked about Inkheart and how it was butchered. Controversial opinion, I think that Aragon wasn't bad. I wouldn't say it was the greatest, but I definitely enjoyed it. It was one of the few movies that I watched, and then I went to read the book because I loved it so much. Okay, now that being said, don't hate, I regret this decision. I read the Wicked series by, what's his name? Something McGuire. I can't even remember his first name. Anyway, he wrote Wicked, and I had the opportunity of going to see the show on Broadway years ago. This was long before my son was born, and I turned it down because I didn't want to be disappointed, even though I love the soundtrack, and now I regret it. So, don't do that to yourself. Other movies that we did talk about, the Vampire Diaries doing better with it. I think there's a lot. Like, Vampire Academy wasn't bad. There's a lot of thing. I feel like we have to talk about it one by one and not overall, because the mass majority of media, like film and TV media, isn't brand new, right? It's adapted by books or comics or things like that, or they're inspired by, I should say. And I'm saying the vast majority, not all of them, obviously. But I think that would be a conversation that we should have, right? So, definitely something that we could get into. Okay, open ending / cliffhangers. I'm not thrilled with them, but I will deal with them. So, if I know it's going to be a series, and, like, it's necessary for it, right? So, like, I read Distance Then Detonate by Luna Mason. The third book is coming out later this month. Those both kind of ended on cliffhangers, right? Now, Distance ended on a cliffhanger to detonate, and then detonate to the next book, right? And it makes sense. And that's okay, right? And I'm good with that, because I know that the third book is coming, and I'm ready for it, But if there is no like, oh, I'm not even intending to write another book, then I get upset. See what I'm saying? Like, it's one of those, I don't know. Now, there was a book that I read last year or the year before. I don't even remember. It's Out of Nowhere by William, I want to say it's William Calley. I did a review a long time ago on my TikTok and my blog, but that kind of ended on a cliffhanger, and I know he has more books out, and I need to go get those. Like, I remember what happens, and I want to go get them, right? So it makes sense, even if they're a few years out, and I know that can get annoying for us readers. It's okay because there is a new book coming. We can't, like, hate on the author. You know what I'm saying? Like, some things happen, right? So it's okay. But if you're just doing it just to annoy your reader, then I don't want it. I don't want it. Okay? I love how it says books you haven't read yet. There's a ton. There are a ton. So yeah. All right. Okay. So this is actually a good question. I have 3 more that I'm going to talk about. So, have you ever read a book set in your city, and how was it? Is the first one. So, I am now in a small town, but I lived in New York City, so there's obviously a lot of books set in the city. In fact, she lives in the city. She lives in Brooklyn, but she travels all around the world. Majority of her books are around the world or around the U.S., not so much in the city. There might be like a scene or two where she's in the city, but yeah. I'm trying to think of anything that was directly in New York City other than comics, and nothing's coming to my mind. However, I also grew up in a small town. I know I'm not going to say try that in a small town for that reason. You know, trust me, there's benefits, but there's also downsides. Okay? Anyway, My Side of the Mountain was written for my town. In my little town library, there's a whole selection of her books there. But I love the book. It felt very homey to me, right? So it was the young character, I think it was a girl, if I remember correctly, like, was hiking in the woods and, like, for fun. And yeah, I know that sounds strange if you grew up in a city, but growing up upstate or, like, in the wild, growing up in the woods area, yeah, we would have just hiked for fun. So anyway, she came across a falcon and, like, helped it and stuff. So, there's some other books that are set around here. I can't remember the names. I'd have to do a whole big, like, search of it. But we do have a lot of local authors, which is really awesome. Oh, I put the thing away, right? All right. The last book I finished was Almost There, by Farah Rashan, which you'll see that review as of yesterday. And then my current reads, I'm currently in the middle of Johnny Appleseed by Joshua Whitehead and My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. Both are Indigenous reads, so they're about Indigenous characters by Indigenous authors. I'm enjoying both of them. But yeah, that is what's happening. I might put on an audiobook later, but I got some other things to do. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this little Q&A. Feel free to ask any other questions. Maybe we'll do another one eventually in like a year or so, or do a live on that. But you can always come join me on lives Saturdays and Sundays on TikTok by the same name. So come check me out. Sending you all love, and I hope you all have a fantastic day.